Hello, everyone, and welcome to this SportTechie Pro Day, Tech Trends Driving the Future of Sports Marketing. This is the start of Track 1, Trending Strategies, NIL, NFTs, and Other Opportunities. I am Dan Kaufman, SportTechie's Managing Director, and I am pleased to welcome to the stage for this panel Grant Dexter, CEO and co-founder at Fanaply, Josh Goodstadt, EVP of Licensing at Think450, and Casey Schwab, CEO and founding partner at Altius Sports Partners. This is the good, the bad, and the wealthy, NIL and NFT Synergies. Welcome to the stage, gentlemen.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
Of course. Let's get started with Casey. Casey, you've lived in kind of both of these NIL and NFT worlds, including, I think, if I recall discussions with you, considering blockchain and digital collectibles at the NFLPA when you were there a few years back. Take us back to those days, and specifically, what was the problem you were thinking you were trying to solve, and how far did you actually get?
Yeah. And Dan, as you know, I've been texting you every time I see a headline about NFTs over the last year, saying like, we talked about this in 2017 and 2018. Look, NFTs, which we're calling NFTs now, previously was crypto collectibles, right? And it all as the other panelists know and can speak to, it's back to the blockchain. And I'll let the other panelists be the experts on what blockchain is and what it isn't. But the short version, when we were at the NFLPA, part of my role was managing counterfeit product. So if you think about, and this is big, I know in Josh's world too, if you think about counterfeit product, counterfeit jerseys through the NFLPA and our relationship with Fanatics, counterfeit trading cards, counterfeit autographs on memorabilia. If you think about it, all it comes down to is authentication. How do you authenticate that something is what it says it is? And when we started learning about blockchain and what it can do and the benefits of blockchain, the big one being authentication and traceability and going back to the origin, the source of wherever something started, whether it's a physical or a digital good, we got really intrigued. And we spent a lot of time and a lot of effort on tracking down how do we incorporate this blockchain technology into products, physical products, upload them onto a digital blockchain, so physical to digital, which I think is really important in the entire conversation around blockchain and NFTs, is tying physical to digital. And then you can have consumers, as they buy physical products, authenticate the product is what it says it is. The counterfeit problem is massive. It's much bigger than I think most people realize. And it's two things, right? You have number one, there's two big effects of it for the NFL players that I used to represent back in my past life. Number one, it's revenue, obviously, because if somebody's buying a fake jersey, a counterfeit jersey, those dollars are not royalties going back to the players, which was very important. The second one, I think, leads more into the NFT conversation around if you can trace a product, if you think about a trading card, if you can trace it, now you can get into the secondary market and the third market or the third sale, the fourth sale, the fifth sale. And that's what we got so intrigued by is, okay, not only can you authenticate a product is what it says it is, but now you can almost create royalties and residuals. So the example that I would use with players and now in my current life with athletic directors in the college space is think about every time you watch Seinfeld on TNT or TBS, Jerry and Larry David, Jerry Seinfeld and Larry David, they're getting paid. I mean, they're already getting royalties. And how do we come up with that structure where NFL legends, NBA legends, their cards and their autographs are being sold on eBay and elsewhere, and they're not seeing any of those dollars. So that's a short version of what we did at the NFLPA. We spent a lot of time with it. We got pretty far with it, and I would love to pass the baton and say, hey, Josh, I think Think450, go figure that out, because I would love to see the counterfeit problem, even though it's not the center of my world anymore. I would love to see that problem solved.
Well, it's a great passing of the baton. Josh, NBA Top Shot. I mean, it's the biggest thing of Q1 and Q2 in 2021. And you've been involved in that from the beginning, as far as I understand, or at least early stage discussions. Take us back to that as well. And again, I'll ask you the same question. What was the problem or the opportunity that you saw, and what factors made it all come together for success in 2021?
Right. Well, I think Casey touched on those factors of what we were trying to solve, right? The authentication aspect of it all, the smart contracts, the ownership, of digital collectibles, and certainly the secondary market, which I think is something that will really change, our industry for the better in the long term across other categories as well, most notably trading cards, which has sort of been a sore point for athletes historically in terms of, generating revenue off of the secondary sale when you continue to see like the prices skyrocket. I think looking back, it's definitely been a journey. I think this goes back to probably spring 2018. We took back our player rights. We're in the midst of sort of negotiating all of our licensing deals. And at the same time, we start getting approached by a number of different companies, entities, talking to us about blockchain, talking to us about NFTs. And I'd say, not necessarily the thing we're trying to solve, but in the moment, we're trying to solve, what is this? I didn't have a background in blockchain, heard about it, knew a little bit about Bitcoin, but wasn't that familiar. And I think that was one of the first things that we were just having to figure out is exactly what is this and what does it mean? So you go down, I think it was the summer of 2018, we go down a vortex of talking to a wide range of folks, including people over at the NFLPA who were, maybe a year or so ahead of us, in the space in terms of how they're looking at it. And I think in the end, I have a licensing background and we still use many of the same parameters in which we would evaluate any licensing opportunity. I think first we wanted to, because we were looking at several proposals and how do we weed out, these new companies and these new entities and what makes sense. And I think first, it's looking at track record of success. And frankly, no one really had a long track record, but certainly Dapper Labs, had something interesting with CryptoKitties and showed, what that could look like. They had something really tangible for us to kind of hold on to. And then, we also wanted to ensure, because it started to sort of look and feel like, trading cards. And we wanted to make sure we weren't doing something, that was going to just look exactly like trading cards, except it's on the blockchain, because we've got Panini to do that and they're experts in it. And certainly it's a category all of the PAs have been hypersensitive about for decades, going back to even my time at the NFLPA. And so we wanted to ensure, we had a point of differentiation. So in talking with Dapper, they sort of assured us and came up with just some basic ideas on what this could look like. And then I think the other aspect that was just hard to wrap our head around a little bit early on was just getting onto a blockchain platform, having to, get a digital wallet, do metaverse, all of those things. And just, there was sort of this friction, right? And so what Dapper came to us with was just mostly frictionless opportunity in terms of, okay, yes, we're going to appeal to those that are sitting on cryptocurrency, but also, those that just that are fans and they want to get into this and want to use their credit card. We're going to make it seamless for them. And ultimately, that's what's occurred.
Interesting.
Hey, Dan, can I hop in on that?
Yeah, of course. I was going to mention actually CryptoKitties because I saw you smiling when
that's unbelievable. That's not what I was going to say, but CryptoKitties is one of the most remarkable. I tell, so I'm from rural Wisconsin, Dan, as you know, and I tell my uncles and my aunts, anybody I can about CryptoKitties because they don't have any clue about blockchain. I love telling people that story just about like the dollars. It's insane. But one of those things you just said, Josh, about frictionless, going back to like other applications of blockchain, is that one of the roadblocks of the counterfeit application was making it frictionless. We had conversations with Panini and Fanatics. How do you take a product physical and get it to the digital? And that transaction, the physical to the digital, for anybody who's watching in the NFT space, to me, from my vantage point from the NFLPA, as well as now working with universities, that is the most critical piece, is getting it onto it. Once you get it onto it, the possibilities are endless. But that was frankly one of the reasons, one of the roadblocks / dead ends we ran into is how do we, like in the manufacturing supply chain process, how do we get this onto the blockchain? And it's not as easy as it sounds.
Yeah, I remember having conversations with you about that, Casey.
It was a harder problem than it sounds.
Yeah.
Casey, I believe you were in our office on a panel with all the unions. Maybe it was about gambling, and you were going on and on about blockchain. I mean, people were looking like, what is he talking about? Still in those early stage, but certainly you've been a big supporter and backer and have believed in this technology, for quite a long time.
Well, Grant, you've been in it for quite a long time too. And you probably know more than any of us here about blockchain and NFTs. But why don't you just start by telling us where did Fanaply start, right? And I know it didn't start in sports, but let's talk about the different groups you've worked with: music, sports, and within sports, both athletes and teams and events like the Kentucky Derby. And by the way, feel free to touch on any things that the other panelists said, but also I want to hear a little bit of that background and then ask you a question that, what are the most important goals from those different groups from a marketing perspective? Do they vary? Are they similar? Tell us about that.
Yeah, really cool listening to some of the journeys and the background in sports on the blockchain. We started in music. I've been involved in ticketing and music for a while, and it was just an area that we felt we understood. We actually got our start with Coachella in 2019, where we issued NFTs to fans in exchange for behavior. So we had the official Coachella 2019 NFT. We had a stage hopper NFT you could earn by visiting all the stages. We had a foodie, environmental, art lover badge, and it was a pilot project. We had something like 60,000 people participate running around the festival trying to earn these NFTs. And that was a real aha moment for us. And after the festival ended, we had 25,000 people sign up for our website to keep their NFTs. We were calling them digital collectibles back then. They didn't really know what they were, but there's a generation of Gen Zs that understand digital items. And they were like, there is one of 25,000 of these, and I'm not losing it. And that was a moment where we were like, wow. We ended up getting in this Techstars music program and started working with everyone from, Ticketmaster with a band called 5 Seconds of Summer, where we did digital ticket stubs for fans that didn't refund their tickets. And we worked with One Direction. And we just saw, I think we issued close to 250,000 NFTs last year. I think we look at them as, I love what Dapper has done and Top Shot, Hat Tip, amazing product. I love we always talk about moments, memories, and milestones for, athletes, teams, arenas, players, and musicians and comedians. And I think they captured that so well. But I think there's a next step to this, which is proof of fandom. Did you go to 10 games in a row, or were you one of the first 1,000 people in the stadium? There's status associated with that. It's oh, you've been to 10 games in a row. We're going to award you an NFT that only people that have been to 10 or 20 games get. And the idea of utility and engagement, I think, is a really powerful part of the NFT discussion and future. I love capturing moments and selling, IP around things that are really powerful. But there's also a whole engagement strategy where fans are going to collect these, and you're going to be able to be like, oh, these are my super fans. These are our team's super fans, and we're going to award them things or give them access to drops that no one else has. And just seeing from the live event side at Coachella how engaged people were and what they would do to get to the festival early just to earn one of these digital mementos. They're all just looking for recognition, right? Proof of fandom. I was there first. I'm a bigger fan of you, and I've earned it through all of these NFTs that I've either earned or purchased. We think that's a massive, massive part of the future.
You just did something with the New Jersey Devils, and if I'm not mistaken, when I checked it out, it looked like there were two different opportunities, but only one for each one. Is that correct? So there was one NFT that was issued for each of these opportunities. Is that right?
Yeah, New Jersey, they were incredible. They came to us with a whole plan, and normally we're like as Josh said, we're normally ideating and coming up with ideas, which is also great. But they've come with a plan that wants to celebrate the history of New Jersey, the accomplishments of the team, the community in which it operates, the arena in which it does, and the future of the team. So they started with 2 one-of-ones. One was the 1982 kind of foundation, and one was around a cup championship. And those were both one-of-ones, but they have a whole 3 or 4 month plan where we're releasing now 2 more. and some will be like 500 to 1,000. Some will be one of ones, and I think that's an important part too. I think Dapper has done very well, and maybe some other folks haven't. Like, you know, these NFTs should be about your core fans, and they should be inclusive. Like, every single fan of a team or of an athlete should be able to own an NFT, because just like we all have kids playing Fortnite and Roblox, those are all free games, right? You can get fans in with a free NFT and then be like, hey, do you want to upgrade this? Are you a super fan? Do you want to celebrate in this athlete's accomplishments? And I think there's a huge opportunity to have NFTs be inclusive and engaging and have some utility in the end. And I also love the tie into products. Like, I think that is like the bundling of products and the proof of ownership is massive. And I think it's going to be a huge part of the future, because the tokenized NFT can be associated with a unique code on the physical item, and they can be tied together forever. And if you don't have the NFT, then you can't tell me that that product's real, even though it looks and feels like it. And that I think is also an exciting part of the future.
Very interesting. Sound familiar, Casey?
I can't believe you guys are such NFT nerds. Like, you get, Casey, you were on these things like way back, man.
Well, it was like a dog with a bone. I couldn't stop thinking about it. Like,
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Well, Casey, you didn't do that, but you've had success in your own right with Altius Sports Partners, and let's pivot to that. So we've talked about the professional side and NFTs, but there's an opportunity here, I think, for amateur athletes as well, particularly as name, image, and likeness issues start to move towards a favorable ruling for them. And Casey, you're right in that space. Tell us how frequently the subject of NIL is coming up in your conversations, or excuse me, NFTs is coming up in your conversations with schools, universities, and students.
Yeah. And it is a pivot, but they're related, right? And that's why I was so excited about talking with you guys on the panel and Dan about this topic, because as much as when I was at the PA, we didn't pull off the grand, maybe grandiose visions that we had of eliminating counterfeit NFL jerseys. All of that training is not only relevant, but I would say central to the conversation around what is name, image, and likeness, right? And name, image, and likeness in college is you have products and you have services. So services, appearances, autographs, it's pretty simple. The classic example of going to the car wash or the restaurant. Okay, put that aside for a moment. The other one is products. And when one of the conversations that we have often, our company, Altius Sports Partners, we're working directly with athletic departments, directly with athletic directors and everybody else within the department, and helping them wrap their head around all things NIL. And one of the things that we say to them and to the coaches and to the athletes is work smarter, not harder. All athletes, professional or collegiate, have time constraints. Collegiate athletes have class in addition to being an athlete. They have tutoring sessions. They're 18 to 22 years old. They don't have the experience being a professional, being an adult, and managing a calendar. Let's just be honest. So when we talk about work smarter, we focus on passive IP, licensing. And the easy example is a t-shirt or a bobblehead or a video game. But then now we're getting back to NFTs. It's a whole new category. And as I'm sure, Josh, as the licensing expert, can attest to, new categories don't just pop up every day. In sports licensing, right? You've had video games, you've had trading cards, and you've had apparel. And then you've had, other merch. But those three categories make up this work smarter passive IP opportunity for athletes. Okay, so now getting to the actual question that you asked, Dan, the NIL's coming up, NFT's coming up with every single school that we're working with, and many that we even aren't yet, saying like, okay, so first of all, as an athletic department, how can we integrate NFTs to our workflow and potentially generate revenue for this school, which there are some interesting opportunities there. And then secondly, how is it going to impact these new name, image, and likeness rules changes that are coming in less than 5 weeks in many states? And they're two different conversations, but they're both important. the one thing that I would say, without getting into the weeds about, the school's involvement with NIL and the distinction between educate versus facilitate, I feel very strongly that in the new NIL era in college sports, that if we need to do it, we all need to do it responsibly. And there needs to be backstops for the potential recruiting inducement and booster issues that a lot of folks have talked about. But I feel very strongly that both sets of IP together, the players' IP and the schools and the conferences and the NCAA's IP, if there's a framework by which they can be used together, it is going to make the pie bigger. And that's been my chorus that I've been singing to our ADs that we're working with at the athletic departments is like, look, the framework needs to be such that you rest on market economics, meaning what do people want to buy? They want to buy the college athlete NFT with the Marks, with the LSU Tigers, with the Texas Longhorns. They want to purchase that. And then intellectual property law. So if somebody's infringing on your IP, it's no different than if they're using your IP down the street at the local restaurant and they don't have a license. So these two theories, or these two guardrails, I would say, or guiding principles, if those two are the guiding principles for this whole new NIL era, you could see schools making more money from NFTs, certainly from licensing deals, and the athletes making more money. And it's not all about money, of course, but like when we think about, okay, how are the athletes, where's the money going to come from? One of the big concerns is, well, it's going to cannibalize all of our corporate revenue, and we pay for their scholarships and we pay for the facilities, and that's all true. But if you can find additive dollars, and this is a new category, NFTs, this is something we should all embrace. And I say we, I mean the college athletic community as a whole and the licensing community.
Grant and Josh, and perhaps I'll start with Grant. Do you see a similar opportunity, if not a greater opportunity, for amateur athletes potentially to benefit from the growth in NFTs? Grant, what do you think?
Yeah, I loved hearing what Casey said there. In my previous startup life, I co-signed an artist with a guy named Scott Burchetta named Taylor Swift. And, every time I think of this company, I think, imagine if we'd sold 1,000 Swiftie NFTs back in 2007, and just the social status, the excitement that those fans that supported that artist early on, and the value of those in the future. Like, I think, and it's cool to be on this panel because I want to be able to talk to you guys after this. Like, we're getting hit up from combines and all sorts of folks around amateur athletes. And for us, we need to learn who we need to be speaking to. And I think what you said, Casey, about the teams and the colleges, and because I think there's a massive opportunity around like day one fans, some of the accomplishments that these artists, these athletes have early on. Obviously the team and the college team and the player, but then they also open this, like when you start with a amateur, then once they go pro, they can be like, hey, who owns my NFTs from when I was like in college? I'm going to do a drop specifically for you, and only you guys get access to this drop because you were with me from the beginning. And I love what you said too, Casey. Like, this is a new asset class. These do not come along very often. And because we can write into the smart contract secondary percentages, every time they're traded on the secondary market, the athlete will be rewarded in perpetuity. And that's something that's really exciting, because then the NFT company and the athletes are aligned, because we want to create some scarcity and we want to create status and a bit of engagement around these, because we're going to create long tail value forever. And that's real exciting. But I love listening to you guys too, because I'm learning so much. So appreciate it.
Yeah, of course. Josh, feel free to jump in
Sure.
on that. And I'm gonna.
Yeah, I mean, both Casey and Grant said it. I mean, a new category does not come around like this, and certainly not meaningful category. I mean, I've been doing licensing for 20 years, and there hasn't been quite anything like that. I mean, maybe you could say, when iOS launched and games started taking off there, but nothing quite like this has ever occurred. I mean, I think the interesting thing, whether it's collegiate or professional athletes, is the community aspect, right? So I think, the beauty of Top Shot is we've got an ecosystem, we've got a community, no different than whether it's a collegiate athlete or professional athlete, if they're on their own doing something, if they've got a meaningful social community, then they actually have social currency, whether to launch an NFT, and whether it's to generate revenue or brand building, that certainly opens up, a whole world of opportunities in terms of engagement from the athlete to their fans. And certainly nowadays, you look at these young guys coming into the collegiate ranks from high school, they certainly have big social profiles already. They come into the professional ranks with big social profiles, which is really interesting, which really helps for them to, naturally, when you have a bundle of rights with the athlete in their team uniform, you've got a community based on the collegiate, if it's University of North Carolina, they've got a collegiate, community, but the athlete themselves brings in their own community, which in my opinion, there's some value that they're bringing extra as well, which opens up sort of a whole new sort of realm of sort of whether it's revenue or at a minimum negotiating power on their behalf if they're able to sort of bring a community to the table.
Mm-hmm. Well, there's certainly value there. I think there's no doubt in anyone's mind about that. But Casey, tell us some of the obstacles or the complications that the amateur athletes are going to face.
Yeah. The first one is the regulatory landscape, which is, I mentioned, we're 5 weeks away from July 1st. There are 6 states that go live with live NIL. Or the NIL is going to live in July 1st, which really, without getting too technical, just means that institutions within those states are unable to prohibit their athletes from going out and doing NIL deals, right? And there's probably going to be at least 2 more, if not 3, by July 1st. And there may be NCAA rules that come out. There may be federal legislation. The point is, the first obstacle or the first question mark is the regulatory landscape, and that there have been discussions around blanket prohibition of school IP and athlete IP. And if that happens, just to be very frank, I don't think that the NFT opportunity is going to be nearly as big. There will still be opportunities for both parties, but I just don't think it's going to be as big. And then there are other smaller, more minor issues that in the regulatory framework that could come into play. That's number one. The second one is rights are complicated. And especially when you're talking about highlights. If you're talking about a photo, you have the copyright holder of the photo, whoever took the photo, and typically that's somebody within the university who took the photo, and they probably already granted those rights to the university. And then you have the underlying right of publicity rights, the NIL rights within the photo. Okay, but let's talk about highlights for a second. If there's a highlight and it's from an ESPN broadcast or an SEC network broadcast, now it gets really complicated because you've got the school, you've got the athlete, you've got the conference, and you have the network. And then there are third parties out there who manage the archival licensing for colleges. And then to complicate things further, within each athletic department, you have a licensing group, you have your general counsel's office, which is outside the athletic department, and then you have the AD and the executive team. And I only say all of that because if you think about, again, I'm sure there are some folks watching who are in the NFT space, have startups or other companies that are looking to get into college. I think what's absolutely critical, and what I've learned from experience, is having conversations with the right folks within that ecosystem that I just laid out is really important. And making sure that you don't just dive in with one of those parties and start moving too fast. Because once you do that, you alienate one of the other parties, which they're rights holders. And not to get lawyerly here, but like if you are a rights holder and someone violates your rights, you're not going to be thrilled to sit down and say, okay, let's have a negotiation and let's have a conversation. So
a lot of cooks in that kitchen.
So many cooks.
Yeah.
Frankly, more than in pro sports, because in pro sports, you have the union.
Protection. Yeah.
You have the union and there's group licensing and by the way, the brands too. The brands understand the rules in pro sports. They understand how the union works and how the for-profit side works. The brands in college don't. And this is I'm not saying this as an insult. They just have never done it. They've never worked in this. So it's an education curve for the brands, for the conferences, for the schools, and for the athletes. And I just caution folks jumping headfirst in the college space after having a single conversation with one person that's in that ecosystem, even if that person happens to have decision-making authority. Because, and I say that because we've had to navigate that with our schools to say, slow down here. Let's make sure we bring in all the right parties.
Interesting. We've got about 1 to 2 minutes left, guys. This has been really great, and it's gone by fast. But there is more. Our SportTechie Pro members can join the 3 folks here in the SportTechie Pro Members Lounge right after this. You can come up on screen and ask questions and talk to our speakers here. If you're not a SportTechie Pro member, email pro@sporttechie.com. SportTechie Pro annual members get access, and we can get you hooked up. So to close, though, I want to ask this question. I do think there may be some skepticism out there, at least for the long-term growth and benefits from NFTs. What would each of you say to those people who are still skeptical about the value for NFTs for athletes, teams, leagues, amateur, professional, whatever it might be? Josh, I'll let you start.
Yeah, I think the thing to remember, as specific to like Top Shot, it's in beta. It just launched, a year ago. They're still working through a lot of things there. I think it's such an evolving space. So I think a year from now, the space, will look similar, will have other functionality to it. Grant touched on the utility component. You've got the experiential component. I think as it sort of begins to dovetail from what would look like a digital trading card-esque product, you'll see it more move also into the gaming space. And I think that's going, to capture a lot more people and continue to build a critical mass, as well as just generate, additional revenue. So, we're bullish on this opportunity. It's not going away.
Yeah. Thank you, Josh. Grant, you've got about 30 seconds. Go ahead.
Yeah, totally agree with Josh. It's a digital world, and our fans are asking for digital products. And, we made that mistake in the music business. They were asking for digital music in the 2000s, and we didn't listen to them. And they are buying tons of virtual items inside of closed ecosystems like video games, and we need to give them digital products for everyday life. So we're real bullish on it too, and just want to say appreciate what Casey was saying around talking to all the rights holders. I think that's super important. If you want to be a company that's respected, you have to respect everyone that's worked hard to create a piece of that opportunity and pie, and make sure you're not crossing lines there.
Thank you, Grant. Casey, 30 seconds. Take us out.
I'll be quick. Digital to physical, physical to digital. Make it easy.
Fair enough. All right, Casey, Grant, and Josh, thank you so much for your time. A virtual round of applause. We will see our pro members in the Pro Member Lounge momentarily, and stay tuned for the next piece of content coming up on Track 1. Thank you, everyone.